So something happened this past week that made me think a bit more about multiplayer, live service, the big push that's been happening in the industry for the last several years now. Well, take a look at this. It's a bit different than what you'd necessarily expect out of a multiplayer mode for a game. This is Ghost of Yotei Legends Raid building the multiplayer mode's endgame. In this, they do talk about an update where they're adding in the final touches, they say, on the multiplayer with a full raid, different missions. But at the bottom, they say a ghost tale concluded. The raid update was our last major planned update for Legends. It finishes the story of the Yotei 6 in that mode. We've loved to see players playing it, continue to play it, and enjoy it. It's been great. And that's it. So, what we are so used to now are live service games that don't have an end. They don't conclude at all, they don't finish, they just go on forever. And everyone's trying to make that forever game. At least they have been. But I've been wondering, as many people have, just seeing the trends and announcements and cancellations in the industry, if maybe some of these companies are backing away from live service games because they do understand that there is a tremendous cost involved with having a forever game. And sometimes it's a good idea to have what I guess back in the day we would have called tacked on multiplayer. That's sort of what I'm looking at Ghost of Yotei Legends as, and maybe people see that as a term that isn't great necessarily. It's hey, tacked on multiplayer. Not exactly glowing praise for what sounds like a mode they just added on just to throw it in there for extra value. But that is kind of the idea. The game is sold, specifically Ghost of Yotei, was sold on the single player aspect and the mode, and then the multiplayer is just there as an extra. It just adds value. And I will give them this. Ghost of Yotei Legends is actually quite feature packed. There's a lot of content there, and for it just being an extra mode, it's actually pretty good. So, with that in mind, I would think back to the older days of the original Xbox, the PS2, the GameCube, and then going into the 360, the PS3, and the Wii, where we did have a lot of games that were single player, but then had some sort of multiplayer added on, implemented in some way. And it wasn't always just, hey, arena shooter, team deathmatch, go. Sometimes it was some very unique ideas, and there are some famous ones like Splinter Cell, where they had the spy versus mercenary, and that was such a cool idea back then. But even then, you have like Assassin's Creed, The Darkness, Time Splitters. While that was something I remember just for the multiplayer, there was a campaign there that they would at least push. Mass Effect 3, Uncharted 2, and what's funny is way back then with GoldenEye, that didn't have multiplayer up until the end just about of development. Yeah, that was supposed to just be a single player game basically, but they added it in naturally because you look at the N64, 4 controller ports, you feel like it would make sense because also Nintendo's trying to sell controllers, and either way, it lined up perfectly, and GoldenEye to this day is a game that people look back on for the multiplayer. Okay, so with all of that in mind, when I start to see things like, oh, Sega is canceling their Super game, and at first they just kind of dropped it into their slide deck for investors. Okay, super game canceled. No extra cost associated with this. We're just kind of backing away from this. Well, GameFile did get a response that raised some eyebrows because they say when we launched the initiative in 2019, and yes, it has been more than 6 years since they made the announcement and were making the push for it. Think about 2019 though versus now, all right, in your mind when it comes to live service games and kind of where we were, especially with the massive explosion around something like Fortnite. Those were that at that point, especially going into the pandemic and everything. Fortnite was flying high. It was crazy how many people were playing that game. It was all over the place, right? Say we position two major pillars of our growth strategy. One, focus on our major IP and expand them. And two, develop a AAA online title to achieve significant growth in mid and long term. And we named this project Super Game to reflect our strong commitment to pursuing this ambition, leveraging the expertise of developing and operating online games that we cultivated through Phantasy Star Online 2, which is still running, by the way. People are still playing that game. It's free to play. It's on. I downloaded it recently on the Xbox just to check it out again. And wouldn't you know it, I I go to sign in and there's maintenance for the next 12 hours. It's great. Those are the MMORPG days I remember back then, and our extensive IP portfolio. We worked to create a new form of entertainment that goes beyond the concepts of conventional games. Given the ambitious nature of the project, we adopted a long-term R&D phase for technical validation and related activities. We proceeded cautiously with the intention of moving to full-scale development only after we can confirm sufficient feasibility. However, in light of intensifying market competition, the emergence of competing titles based on similar concepts, and our business conditions, we made the decision to discontinue the development of Super Game during the fiscal year ending March 2026. So, really, if you're looking at this, Sega looked at the market and they said, wow, there are a number of live service big live service games that are attempting to do what we are trying to do with Super Game. Does it make sense to bring this thing to market for it to potentially be a Concord situation where no one plays it, or it gets heavily crushed in the reception online, and then we have to back away from it after we've shown it off? That can damage, of course, your brand, your name. I mean, look at what's happening with Sony, where they really made that push for live service, and they've canceled so many of them. There, you can just look up a list, and it's like they had Twisted Metal that for some reason was going to be a a live service game. The Spider-Man, there was going to be a full, like, I don't say MMO, but one where it was a bunch of different Spider-Man were going to be swinging around together. There was, of course, the God of War live service game. There was something from Ben Studio that was live service. Deviation, they canceled their game, and then the person who left Deviation came back to Sony, and they started a studio, only for that to be canceled. But apparently it wasn't live service, so that's all over the place. And the most infamous one being The Last of Us Online. And that, to me, is the biggest example of a game that should have adopted the model that we had back in the day with the older tacked-on multiplayer style. Because I think The Last of Us Online should have just been Factions 2 attached to The Last of Us Part 2. Like, to me, that seems more straightforward. But what they wanted out of that, clearly, was to be able to have a long-running game for The Last of Us Online and be able to charge people over time for things like battle passes or cosmetics, only for Naughty Dog to realize, wow, it's going to take a while to support this game. Like, we're going to have to be making content constantly, and we won't be able to do anything else. So when I see something like Ghost of Yotei and Sucker Punch go, hey, guys, that's it. We're not going to be adding content to this multiplayer mode. If there's a game-breaking bug, we'll come back and fix it. We'll run support on that. But that's kind of it. Like, we've concluded this multiplayer game, and I think that's exactly what we need to see more and more of, because when you do have Sega go, hey, you know what? The market conditions, the competitive nature, all these live service games hitting the market, doesn't make sense to invest what was reportedly like $800 million into this live service game. Especially when you think back over the last half decade, we just hear about so many failures in live service. And even the ones that do succeed, you occasionally see them pop up on social media where people are tracking the number of players that are in the game, because if it slips up a little bit, it's pointed out that the game has lost 80% of its player base, and that's a whole headline. And I mean, eventually you're going to run out of stuff to do in a multiplayer game, and you're going to move on unless there's some major expansion that hits that game, and all of a sudden it drives interest again. But that then goes back into that content creation cycle where instead of, say, create, I don't know, Destiny 3, you have Bungie having to pick and choose what they're going to do. Do we keep creating content for Destiny 2? Do we take a swing at Marathon? Well, it turns out they probably should have been making Destiny 3 at this point, just based on everything that's happened, hindsight being 2020. But it does make me think that right now, more than ever, a good strategy is to think about some creative multiplayer modes and attach them to some of these single-player experiences. Because now I see people who go, oh, this game is 20 hours long. I'll wait for a sale. And that's fine. I mean, you should honestly be waiting for sales anyway, because these games are getting very, very expensive. But what kind of message does that send to the publisher who mandates at times a lot of this stuff? Okay, the game has to be longer. Let's add some bloat in there, different things to make the game artificially grow to 30 hours. And then it seems like it's more worth it, when really you're just wasting time. I like the idea of adding on some kind of multiplayer mode that reuses single player levels or assets or mechanics and reshapes them into a tacked on multiplayer mode that adds value. Now, It's not always going to be great because what happens with some of these tacked on multiplayer games is they do kind of die off since they're not updated and people will eventually get bored and move on when you do have live service games that have the carrot on a stick mentality and constantly put things in front of you to keep you engaged. And that's just the way it works with free to play live service games, especially where there's some new cosmetic around the corner or something. Here, it would sort of be a static multiplayer environment in that they could do some updates like we see with Ghost of Yotei Legends, but for the most part, what you see is what you get at the beginning. Not every game has to be a forever game. We all only have so much time in the day, and that's one of the biggest things to invest is time, not necessarily just the money aspect. So if there are too many live service games out there trying to pull attention in too many different directions, there just won't be enough people to go around really for the industry to hold all these games up. So yes, some will fail, some will crash and burn. And I think we're already seeing some of the pillars that are in place with something like Fortnite or Roblox or Minecraft or Apex Legends. I think people are pretty well entrenched. And this right now, I think towards the end of the PS5 and the Xbox Series generation and going into next gen, I think this is a great time to play around with some of the multiplayer ideas that they may have internally that don't necessarily line up for a big live service game. Just, attached to a single player game, see what happens. That's typically when you will have some cool ideas, and yeah, maybe you can spin it off into a big live service thing, but you also may have people who just hold on to the game more, are interested in that universe more because they attach the multiplayer that way. It's just an idea and something I was thinking of when I saw Ghost of Yotei Legends with this update that there's an end to their multiplayer game, and the way people reacted, they were surprised, some were annoyed. Like it's very weird to me because that's just kind of how it used to be, but not necessarily now where a new generation of gamers are kind of trained to expect that every multiplayer game has an update every single week and will just go on forever. Doesn't necessarily have to be the case, and I would like to see some of these companies, these studios, these publishers think more in line with the tacked on multiplayer mentality and see what they can come up with. But let me know what you guys think about this one down below in the comments. Seeing Sega back away with their super game, seeing Sony, cancel so many projects, but even I think you're getting some cold feet around live services, specifically for first party companies. I think they're going to keep partnering with other studios that are outside of their typical PlayStation studios and see maybe some things they can come up with, like a four loop, for example, and maybe stop buying studios like Haven for them to give you fair games. Let them make games for live service outside of your first party studios and let your first party studios handle what they're good at, these narrative driven single player experiences. But hey, if they have an idea for tacked on multiplayer, let them go for it, like with Ghost of Yotei Legends. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.